What if the tidy version of history you were taught is only the final chapter? Long before the first cities of Mesopotamia, before writing, before anything modern scholars call civilization, a clay prism claims 8 kings once ruled the earth. Not for decades, for hundreds of centuries each. It has sat in a museum for over 100 years, and historians still cannot fully explain it. Tonight, we open the record they have never been able to close. In 1922, a British excavation led by archaeologist Herbert Weld-Blundell was digging through the ruins of Larsa, an ancient Sumerian city buried beneath the plains of southern Iraq. What they found was a 4-sided clay prism, roughly the size of a paperback, covered edge to edge in cuneiform. They expected the ordinary: grain totals, temple offerings, a tax record maybe. Instead, when the wedge-shaped script was finally translated, scholars found something else entirely: a list of kings, their cities, and the exact length of their reigns, recorded with the flat, procedural tone of a court accountant. No poetry, no embellishment, just names, places, numbers. The Weld-Blundell Prism, as it came to be known, now sits in Oxford's Ashmolean Museum. It is not an isolated find. At least 16 other fragments of the same king list have surfaced across Mesopotamia, in cities including Nippur and Kish, each one telling a version of the same core account. This was not a single scribe's invention. It was a shared foundational history, copied and recopied across generations of Sumerian record keepers who accepted it as fact. It opens with a line that has unsettled historians for a century. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. The first king named is Alulim. His reign, according to the scribe, lasted 28,800 years. The second king ruled 36,000. The third, 43,200. 8 kings in total, across 5 cities, their combined reigns totaling 241,200 years. Then, 4 words end the account entirely. Then, the flood swept over. To a modern reader, the obvious response is dismissal. No person lives for tens of thousands of years. Mainstream historians filed the early kings under myth and moved on, treating the numbers the same way they treat giants in a folktale. That would be the end of it, except for one detail the prism refuses to let go of. After the line about the flood, the list continues, and the kings that follow are real. Among the rulers listed after the flood is Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. His epic is one of the oldest surviving works of literature on Earth, and the walls of his city have been physically excavated. He was not a myth. He was a man who built something archaeologists can still walk through today. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the scribe who wrote this list is trusted for the second half, on what grounds do historians dismiss the first? The same hand wrote both sections, in the same tone, with the same formatting. Nothing on the prism marks one part as legend and the other as record. To the person who carved it, Alulim and Gilgamesh belonged to a single, unbroken history. The deeper researchers looked, the stranger the numbers became. The reigns of the antediluvian kings are not random. They follow the Sumerian sexagesimal system, base 60, the same mathematics that still governs how we divide an hour into 60 minutes and a circle into 360 degrees today. Their largest unit of time was called a sar, 3,600 years. Run the reigns through that lens and the chaos disappears. Alulim's 28,800 years is exactly 8 sars. Alalgar's 36,000 is exactly 10. Enmenluana's 43,200 is exactly 12. These are not exaggerations invented for drama. They are calculated, deliberate, and consistent, the work of a system, not a storyteller. Which leaves 2 possibilities. Either the numbers are symbolic, standing in for something other than literal years, or they are not symbolic at all, and the scribe meant exactly what he wrote. Eridu was not simply the first city on the list. Archaeological digs place its foundations as far back as 5400 BCE, making it one of the oldest known settlements in Mesopotamia. Beneath its ruins, excavators found a small shrine that had been rebuilt again and again, each version larger than the one buried beneath it, as though something about that exact patch of ground demanded to be maintained. Sumerian myth explains why. Eridu belonged to Enki, god of wisdom and creation, remembered as a teacher and an engineer rather than a warrior. If the institution of kingship truly arrived as a gift rather than a human invention, Enki's city is where the record says it landed. In the oldest layers beneath Eridu's shrine, archaeologists also found large quantities of fish bones, piled as though offered deliberately, rather than discarded as waste. Sumerian myth ties Enki to the sea, describing him as emerging from the sweet waters, known as the Abzu. Some later texts go further, describing 7 sages, the Apkallu, sent by Enki before the flood to teach humanity the foundations of civilized life, and depicted wearing the bodies of fish. Whether Alulim and Alalgar were remembered as part of that same tradition, the record does not say. But the pattern of fish, water, and teaching runs through every layer of the city's earliest history. Alulim ruled there first, then Alalgar, for 36,000 years. No stories of conquest survive for either of them. No named battles, no children, no death. Only a name, a city, and a number too large to hold in the mind. That absence is its own kind of evidence. A king who reigns for tens of thousands of years is not remembered the way a mortal ruler is remembered. He is not a person with a biography. He is closer to a fixture, as permanent as the river beside the city, as unquestioned as the sun overhead. For the people of Eridu, kingship was not something that had ever changed hands within living memory, because there was no living memory old enough to have witnessed it change. It simply was, and had always been. Then the list moves. Kingship leaves Eridu for a new capital, Bad Tibira, a name that translates roughly to Fortress of the Metalworkers. The shift in name marks a shift in purpose. Eridu had been the seat of wisdom and water. Bad Tibira was the seat of the forge. Its first king, Enmenluana, reigned 12 full sars, 43,200 years, over a city built around one of the ancient world's most closely guarded crafts, metallurgy. Pulling raw ore from the ground and transforming it, through fire and precise knowledge, into gleaming, durable metal. His successor, Enmengalana, ruled the same length as Alulim, 8 sars exactly, and his reign is tied to a different kind of legacy. The Mi, a set of sacred decrees said to encode the foundations of civilized life, law, writing, music, justice, weaving, even abstract ideas like truth and deceit, kept, according to myth, by Enki himself in Eridu, and disseminated to humanity through kings like this one. The final king of Bad Tibira is where the list stops feeling administrative and starts feeling human. Dumuzid ruled 10 sars, 36,000 years, and unlike the names before him, he survives outside the king list entirely. He is Dumuzid the shepherd, lover of the goddess Inanna, the figure at the center of one of the ancient world's most enduring myths. A god who dies, descends into the underworld, and returns for half of every year. He is the direct ancestor of Osiris in Egypt, Tammuz in Babylon, Adonis in Greece. A dying and rising god, appearing again and again across cultures that had no contact with one another, tracing back to a king listed on a clay prism with an impossible reign. If you have made it this far, you already know more about this document than most people ever will. If a channel like this is worth your evening, a comment telling us where in the list you find the strangest turn helps more than you would expect. Now, back to the record, because the strangest part is still ahead. Kingship moved again, this time to a city named Larak. Unlike Eridu or Bad Tibira, Larsa has never been found. Despite decades of survey work across southern Iraq, no ruins matching its description have surfaced. It exists only as a name on a prism, a capital with no physical trace. Its sole king, Ensipazidana, ruled 8 Sars, matching Alulim's reign exactly. Later texts connect Larsa to Ninurta, a god associated with both destructive floods and life-giving irrigation, a figure of balance rather than conquest. Whatever this king's true role was, the record keeps it hidden as thoroughly as the city itself. The list moves once more to Sippar, a city that has been excavated and confirmed. It was known throughout the ancient world as a center for the worship of Utu, the sun god, later called Shamash, who was also regarded as the supreme judge of both gods and men, said to see everything that happened beneath him during the day. Its king, Enmendarana, ruled just under 6 Sars, 21,000 years, and his story is the most direct link the entire prism draws between its rulers and the heavens themselves. Later Mesopotamian texts claim he was summoned upward, seated among the gods Utu and Adad, and taught the secrets of divination, how to read oil poured on water and the markings on a sacrificed animal's liver, before being sent back to instruct humanity and establish a line of priests to carry that knowledge forward. He did not die. He ascended. The parallel is almost too exact to ignore. In the book of Genesis, a patriarch named Enoch is described the same way. He walked with God, and then he was no more, because God took him. 2 separate traditions, 2 separate languages, describing the same kind of departure from the world, which raises the question underneath the entire document. Is this coincidence, borrowed myth, or the same event, remembered twice? The final antediluvian city was Shuruppak. Its king, Ubaratutu, ruled 18,600 years, shorter than any reign before him, as though the record itself were counting down. The list gives no account of his deeds. What it gives instead is his son. Other texts, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, name that son as Utnapishtim, warned by the god Enki to abandon his house and build a vessel before the coming flood. He does. And then, in 4 words, the king list ends its account of the old world. Then, the flood swept over. This is not unique to Sumer. Flood accounts appear with startling similarity in cultures with no possible contact with one another. The Bible's Noah, told to build an ark before the waters cover the highest mountains. Deucalion in Greek myth, surviving a flood sent by Zeus inside a wooden chest. Manu in Hindu tradition, warned by a fish that later reveals itself as the god Vishnu. Flood stories recorded from the Aztecs of Mexico to Aboriginal communities in Australia, from Norse legend in Scandinavia to oral traditions across North and South America. For years, that repetition was treated as coincidence, a natural story for river-dependent civilizations to invent independently. Then the geological record offered a harder answer. Around 12,800 years ago, at the close of the last ice age, the Earth was plunged abruptly back into near-glacial conditions, an event known as the Younger Dryas. One leading theory points to a comet impact over the North American ice sheet, releasing enough heat to destabilize the ice and send a catastrophic pulse of meltwater into the oceans. Sea levels would have risen fast. Coastlines would have vanished. Closer to home, excavations at Shuruppak itself, the very city Ubaratutu ruled, uncovered a flood layer of river silt nearly 10 feet deep, dating to around 2900 BCE, cleanly separating the city's earlier history from everything that came after. That particular flood was regional, not global, but its memory, layered on top of an older and far larger catastrophe, may be exactly how a local disaster and a planetary one merged into a single shared story. Before the flood, the list records kings who reigned for tens of thousands of years. After it, the numbers collapsed to hundreds, then decades, then the ordinary human lifespan. Something changed at that boundary. The document does not explain what. It only marks the line. After the flood, the list resumes in the city of Kish, and the numbers finally become believable. Reigns of 960 years, 840, 300, shrinking further with each generation until they read like ordinary human history. It is here, in the first dynasty of Uruk, that the list names Gilgamesh. His entry is brief. The divine Gilgamesh. His reign was 126 years. But no other name on the prism carries this much weight outside it. Gilgamesh is the central figure of the world's oldest surviving epic, predating Homer by well over 1,000 years. He is a demigod king, 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, who loses his closest companion and is confronted, for the first time, with his own mortality. Terrified, he sets out to find the one man said to have escaped death, Utnapishtim, survivor of the flood. He finds him, and Utnapishtim tells him the entire story of the deluge firsthand, the warning, the ark, the storm, the immortality granted to him and his wife alone. Gilgamesh is listening to a living witness of the world before the flood, and when he asks for that same gift, he is told plainly that it was a one-time exception. The age of immortals has ended. He fails. He returns to Uruk, mortal, and rules 126 years before his name is entered on the same list that recorded Alulim's 28,800. For a long time, Gilgamesh himself was assumed to be legend, the same as the kings before him. Then excavators uncovered Uruk's walls, exactly as the epic described them, along with inscriptions naming other kings from his dynasty. He was real, which means the prism connects, without any change in tone or format, a king whose city has been walked by modern archaeologists to a king who supposedly ruled before the mind can comprehend. The pattern on this prism, a golden age of long life ended by a catastrophic flood, does not stay in Mesopotamia. In Genesis, the patriarchs from Adam to Noah live for centuries. Adam at 930 years, his son Seth at 912, and Methuselah, the longest lived of all, at 969. After the flood, the lifespans fall sharply. Abraham lives to 175, Moses to 120. By the time of King David, the psalmist settles on 70 or 80 years as the human limit. Even Genesis has its own version of Enmendarana, Enoch, who walks with God and is taken rather than dying. In Egypt, the historian Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BCE, recorded a history that opens the same way, with a line of divine and semi-divine rulers reigning for thousands of years before the first mortal pharaoh, Menes, unified the country. The Turin King Papyrus, a damaged document from the reign of Rameses II, confirms the same structure, beginning its own list with dynasties of gods. In Hindu cosmology, the first and greatest of the 4 ages, the Satya Yuga, describes humans as physically larger and living for 100,000 years, with each subsequent age shortening both lifespan and virtue down to the present and diminished Kali Yuga. In China, legendary sage emperors, including the Yellow Emperor, are remembered for reigns lasting centuries before the historical dynasties begin. Even the Inca traced their first rulers to direct descent from the sun. Separate cultures, separate continents, no shared contact, and yet the same structure surfaces again and again. An age of extraordinary longevity, a catastrophic break, and a diminished world that follows. Historians have long explained this as a shared human tendency to romanticize the past. But the more precisely these traditions echo one another, right down to the detail of a single family or a single ruler surviving the water, the harder that explanation becomes to hold on to. Confronted with all of this, historians have settled on a handful of competing explanations, and none of them fully close the case. The first is the conventional view. The prism is political propaganda, likely compiled around 2100 BCE, to give a later Sumerian king an unbroken line of legitimacy, stretching back to the beginning of time. The long reigns are symbolic, tied to the sacred base, 60 mathematics of the culture, not literal accounts. This is the tidiest explanation, and it is also the one historians lean on most. It struggles, though, to explain why the tone never shifts between the mythical kings and the historical ones, and why the same structure appears in cultures the Sumerians never met. The second is that the list is a misunderstood historical record. Perhaps each name represents a dynasty, rather than a single ruler, a clan that held power across generations, rather than one impossibly long-lived man. It is a reasonable adjustment, but it does not account for figures like Dumuzid, remembered not as an institution, but as an individual with a story, a lover, and a death. Other researchers have proposed the years were originally a smaller unit, months rather than solar years, but the math breaks down under that reading too, collapsing the elegant SAR pattern into something far less precise than what the prism actually records. The third is the most radical and the one most associated with researcher Zechariah Sitchin, who argued the list should be read literally, as a record of a non-human governing presence on early Earth, with the flood marking the end of that era, rather than the invention of it. It is the explanation that accounts for the most anomalies at once, from the sudden and unexplained leap in Sumerian mathematics and astronomy to the precision of the SAR cycles themselves. It is also the one resting most heavily on translations and claims that mainstream scholarship has not accepted. None of the three fully satisfies. Each solves part of the puzzle and leaves the rest untouched. What the prism actually is may never be settled. A record of political ambition, a garbled memory of real ancient dynasties, or something closer to what it claims to be, in the same flat, unembellished tone the scribe used for everything else on the tablet. The clay does not argue for any of these. It simply states its numbers and lets historians keep failing to fully explain them. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more ancient mysteries and impossible discoveries.